You are listening to the Truth to Live By podcast, a ministry of Windward Baptist Church. To learn more about our church, you can check out our website at windwardbaptist.org.
Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah. Hosea, of course, was kind of same time as Isaiah, and he wrote to the northern kingdom as Isaiah wrote to the southern kingdom. Then you have Joel, who was from the southern kingdom, and he also wrote to the southern kingdom. And then you have Amos, who is from the southern area, but he is writing to the northern kingdom. And then after that you have Obadiah, and he is writing to Edom, the Edomites. So as we looked at Hosea, or as we looked at Joel, if you remember the book of Hosea, where God had him to marry a woman who was going to be unfaithful to him, and then he was not to divorce her, but he was to go after her and pay off her debts to her lovers and to make the relationship work. And that was an illustration of how God is and how brokenhearted he is because of our unfaithfulness, or the unfaithfulness, of course, in a chapter particularly of the nation of Israel, how they were unfaithful to him, and yet he's still faithful to them. And then you see Joel, the theme of Joel is the day of the Lord, the judgment time period where God intervenes in the affairs of the world. And now you can see right now it's man's day. You know, man is having his day, and he is just saying all kind of stuff, doing all kind of stuff, living as if there is no God for the most part. The secular humanistic crowd or philosophy, the secular worldview, just saying all kind of blasphemies, just living and doing things that are totally against God. But God is, sometimes people think, why does God allow this? Well, you see, God, he does not fly off the handle, or he doesn't have a knee-jerk reaction when someone does something or says something against him. He doesn't just throw down a lightning bolt when they make him upset. But all of this is being stored up, and it will be unleashed during the day of the Lord. And of course, that's going to be where God, that's the tribulation period, God has his day. And then, of course, it's going to end with the millennial kingdom. And things are going to be set up the way God intends for it to be, how he purposed for it to be, how it was back in the Garden of Eden before the fall of man. So the theme is the day of the Lord, and it's illustrated by a locust plague. There was a locust plague where the locust came into Israel and ate everything. That was a picture of what the day of the Lord is going to be like. It's just a small taste, small picture of it. So that's the theme of Joel. The theme of Amos is the denunciation of the nations, judgment upon the surrounding nations of Israel and Judah. Then Obadiah is the doom of the Edomites. So day of the Lord, denunciation of the nations, and the doom of the Edomites. And of course, the prophets, or the message in Hosea was to the southern kingdom, or Hosea was to the northern kingdom, Joel was to the southern kingdom, and Amos is to the northern kingdom, and Obadiah is to the Edomites. It helps to know these things when you're reading it. So look at the book of Amos. I like this prophet. When I think about Amos, you think about someone who's a bivocational minister type. I guess because I'm bivocational. You know, I drive school bus, side job construction, do what you got to do, right? And I see Amos is that way. So what's happening during the time frame of Amos is he was around during the time of a king that was named Jeroboam II. Jeroboam II was a mighty warrior. He led the nation to expand its borders and the nation they were very successful in that. They were making a lot of money for the nation. The nation was very wealthy at this time. But what happens when a nation becomes wealthy, sometimes the rich gets richer, the poor gets poor. And so when the rich gets richer, they like to rig things in that's going to help them to become even richer. You know, one time I remember in school, there was this game that the teacher wanted us to play. We didn't play it like she wanted it, like how she wanted it to be played. But it was this card game, and in the back of the cards, you had like an instrument or something, like you had a plow or a crown, or you had just different things. And so she just passed out the cards, and then you try to get as many of the same kind as you could. So you're trading with people. You didn't know what none of this meant. And then when she told you, okay, all those that have the crowns, you are the noble class. And now you make the rules. So you can make whatever rules you want. Like, let's say the rules is when the cards are dealt, everybody that has a crown has to give it to us. Like, they can make whatever rules they want. But we were kind of nice, I guess, in our class, so we didn't make those kind of rules. But that's what her point was. So those that are of the noble class, or those that are of the, I guess you could say, the government, those that are the politicians that got elected to their position, they start to rig things in order to make it work for themselves. I remember one time when I lived at Kahalu'u, we had a board. There's a board that governs the properties, and because there's all kind of financial, there's the books that they have to balance, and then you have maintenance fee, you have upcoming costs of the roofs and all the different things. You have different staff you got to pay, and you have all this money. So everybody pays a maintenance fee. So you have to have a board that they kind of run things. And what happens a lot of times is you don't like how things are. You look around and say, man, we're paying all this in maintenance fee, and look at the yard, And that's kind of normal. People see things. And so now I wanted to get on the board. So I went to the meeting to try to get elected, and you're trying to ask people to vote for you so you can get on the board. But at this particular meeting, they had a rule that whoever's not at the board, they can they automatically, or I don't know if they have to, if they don't write who they're voting for, then whoever's not there, the board gets to vote for who they say they're voting for. So I forget what that was called. But so they did not want me to be on the board. Some of them didn't want me to be on the board. So whoever was in the room, a lot of them knew me. They were my neighbors, friends, and so they voted for me. But, proxy, yeah. The proxy vote. That means that proxy is when they're voting for the people that's not there. So the proxy vote was like 77%. 77% of all the people that were lived in that in the townhouses there in Kahalu'u were not there. So you only had like 33% is there. Is that right? 23? Yeah, I'm not too good at math. 22? Whichever. But it doesn't matter, right? You're not going to win. So then they're tallying up all the votes. They said, I got so much percentage, which is a real low percent. I think I had 16%. And then, but now all these people that's on the board already, the board votes for the proxy, so they all got back on. And I thought, this is weird. Well, that's the way it's written in our... Well, who wrote it in there? Them. So now they can't ever get off. No one else can win. But something had happened that someone couldn't continue. So then they have to choose. And I was the one there, right? Someone had to get off of the board, so boom, I got on. But I thought, this was weird. At least that's the way it was set up. And a lot of times in politics, that's the way it is. You'd like to think that when you vote, or when there's an election, or when someone is running for government, that you got qualified or you got good people that's running for the position. But that's not really the case. In order to get in the position, you have to have money. And you get money by people donating or giving to your campaign. People are going to give to your campaign because they want something in return. So it's all set up. And the richest people are the ones that, like if Pastor Mark wanted to run for, let's say, U.S. Senator, if the amount of money he has to raise per day is astronomical because of all the advertisement you need. So you need these rich people. You're not going to make it otherwise. So they say, hey, Pastor Mark, we're going to give you millions of dollars or whatever. And there's all kind of rules on how much you can give, but there's loopholes and there's all kind of tricky things that they do. And so, but in return, we want you to back up our, what we believe in. And if this is someone who's in favor of abortion, and now you're going to be running, so now that's what you got to be, even if you don't believe in that, because otherwise I'm not going to help you. Or I tell you this, and you have to do what I say because I own you now, because I put you there. And really, that's how politics in our country work. You don't get, the people do not represent, the senators and the congressmen, they do not represent us, normal people. They represent the wealthy ones that got them there. That is just a fact, and it's sad. That's the way it is. And that's kind of how it reminds me of how things were in Amos' day. So he didn't like how it was because you have the rich getting richer, the poor getting poor, and not just that, the poor were getting abused. So if something happened and they had to go to court, or someone says that this is their land now and there's a disagreement or whatever, they go to court and the judges are bribed, so they're going to represent the rich and they're not going to represent the poor, and then the poor are going to get shafted. They're going to get used and abused, and what's going to happen is they're going to be sold into slavery. And you don't have anybody standing up for them. And Amos was a type of guy who he didn't like to see that. So he wanted to make a difference. And so him as a prophet, I like that because a lot of Amos was the type of prophet that there was two reasons, and we talked about this before, two major reasons why the nation of Israel was sent into captivity. And remember now, you got the kingdom was divided north and south. That happened after Solomon. You had Saul, David, Solomon, then it divided. Jeroboam was in the north, Rehoboam was in the south. In the south, you have that was the main part of the kingdom because that's where Judah and Jerusalem was. So you had the two southern tribes, which was Judah and Benjamin. Then you had the northern tribes, and the northern tribes were the tribes that rebelled. And Jeroboam, when he became king, the first king after the division, he knew that if you look at, like, let's say if this is the boundary in a sense, and you have Jerusalem over here. Jerusalem's where the temple is. They have 3 times a year, all the men have to go to the temple. Three times a year for the feast days. Well, he knew if everyone keeps coming down there, they're going to start wanting to be a part of the southern kingdom. They're going to have, the southern kingdom's going to have too much influence over them. So he made temples in the northern kingdom, in the southernmost part of the northern kingdom, in Bethel and Gilgal. And he put calves to worship in these places. That's why the Bible says when you read the book of Kings, when it talks about a particular king, that he did evil in the sight of the Lord, like Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, that caused Israel to sin. That was what he did, that's why. Now, during the time of Amos, there's another guy who's called Jeroboam the second, and he was worse than Jeroboam the first. He was probably the worst king that the northern kingdom had. Now, he was very successful militarily and politically as far as getting money for the people, the rich, that probably was happy with him. They probably loved each other, but he was very wicked. And there's 2 reasons, and we said this many times, that the northern kingdom and then, of course, the southern kingdom went into captivity, and that was because of idolatry and social injustices, where people are being abused. There's 2 commandments that if you were to break down the 10 commandments into 2 commandments, it's love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbors yourself. Love God, love others, right? And then it's condensed down even further into just the word love. So, some of the prophets focus on the idolatry, but Amos focuses on the social injustices, that the people are being mistreated, and he didn't like that. Another thing about Amos is, well, we just start the book, and we'll talk about it as we go. It says, the words of Amos, who was among the herdmen of Tekoa. This area that he lived was in the southern kingdom. It was a town at the edge of the Judean wilderness, which was about five miles southeast of Bethlehem. And it was located on a hill which was 2,700 feet high. So almost 3,000 feet high. So that's like, how tall is Denver? Is it like 3,000 feet? 5,000 feet. Mile high. So this is about a little over half of that. So I remember being in Colorado, and my brother used to live at a place called Alamosa, and it was 7,500 feet elevation, and it was in what they call, it was a valley. I think it was called Alamosa Valley or Neo Valley? No, I don't know. That's Hawaii, Neo Valley. You should have laughed a little bit harder than that one. Yeah. It was Neo Valley, I think. No laughing. So it was 2,700 feet high. It was one of the poorest districts in Israel and may have been the area that John the Baptist was raised. It didn't rain much there. It was kind of like Waianae, kind of like. And this area was better for raising sheep because it didn't rain much, and sheep and goats rather than for crops. So when it says he is among the herdmen, that means that he was not a hired shepherd. Because the rich people, they'd hire somebody to take care of the animals. Because remember, those that were, just like when Jesus appeared to the shepherds, it was kind of unusual because the shepherds, that was a blue-collar worker type. And you had to mess with animals, and animals stink. And you had to clean up after the animals. So it was an unclean trade. So you would hire people to do these things. But he wasn't someone that was hired. He was someone that had his own flock. So if you had your own flock, you had to pay for the area for them to graze. So in order to do that, he had side work that he did, that he could do while he was tending to his flock. And so what he did was, which sounds like a really fun job, there were sycamore trees, and these, it was kind of like a fig, but not as good, not as sweet. But in order for it to ripen, you had to make a hole in the bottom of it. So you had these guys that had all this sycamore fruit, they had to have people make these holes in this fruit. So he would be doing that to get money or to trade off in order for his animals to graze. So this is the kind of prophet he was. He was a bivocational prophet. He worked with his hands. He tended to his flock. So he was that kind of a person. So the words of Amos, who was among the herdmen of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. Now, historically, we don't know of this particular earthquake that's talked about, but when they test, I guess they know when earthquakes happen. There was an earthquake at this time, and it was a major earthquake that caused a lot of damage. So he's giving you the time frame, the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Now, remember, Uzziah was a good king, but then he felt like he wanted to be a priest also. Now, there is only one king priest. That's Jesus Christ. And anytime someone wants to take away that, I guess you could say that typology that points to Jesus Christ, the Lord does not deal with them too kindly. Just, I mean, you can probably think of different instances in people in the Bible that were struck down, when they did things that messed with that typology. So he did that. King Uzziah did that. And as a result, he became leprous. You remember that? And then, of course, he died that way. So in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. So it tells you during that time when Uzziah was king in Judah, and when Jeroboam, the son of Joash, and this is, like I said, Jeroboam the second, 2 years before the earthquake. And he said, the Lord will roar from Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem. And the inhabitants of the shepherds shall mourn, and the top of Carmel shall wither. In other words, the Lord is going to judge, and he is not happy. So Amos is, I guess you could say, he is a good preacher. He knows how to get people's attention. And when you're a preacher or you're a public speaker in any way, shape, or form, you're wanting people to listen to you. So you try to do the things that causes them to, for you to be interesting, or, and you have to set up your speech or whatever. It depends on what kind of speaking you're going to be doing, motivational or whatever, educational, or, or you're just trying to keep the lights on. See, we did that for attention getters, sometimes. So he knows that when I make a signal, then he turns the lights off. Yeah, whatever that means. Okay. So the Lord will roar because he's not happy at what's going on. Verse 3, thus saith the Lord. Oh, this is what I was trying to say. So he's getting people's attention. See, the nation of Israel had enemies surrounding them. So he's going to start talking about judgment upon God's enemies, the enemies of his people. And they're going to be like, yeah. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Damascus, and for 4, I will turn away the punishment thereof, because they have threshed Gilead with threshing instruments of iron. But I will send a fire into the house of Hazael, which shall devour the palaces of Ben-Hadad. And I will break also the bar of Damascus, and cut off the inhabitant from the plain of Avon. And him that holdeth the scepter from the house of Eden, and the people of Syria shall go into captivity into Kir, saith the Lord. And all of God's people said, Amen. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they carried away captive the whole captivity to deliver them up to Edom. But I will send a fire on the wall of Gaza, as we say today, Gaza, which shall devour the palaces thereof. And I will cut off the inhabitant from Ashdod, and him that holdeth the scepter from Ashkelon. And I will turn mine hand against Ekron, and the remnant of the Philistines shall perish, saith the Lord God. It's kind of like this. Damascus, Gaza. Verse 11, thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Edom, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because he did pursue his brother with the sword, and did cast off all pity, and his anger did tear perpetually, and he kept his wrath forever. But I will send a fire upon Teman, which shall devour the palaces of Bozrah. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of the children of Ammon, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof. It says 3 and it says and for 4. That means a complete, like nothing left off. It's like above and beyond. I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have ripped up the women with child of Gilead, and that they might enlarge their border. But I will kindle a fire in the wall of Rabbah, and it shall devour the palaces thereof with shouting in the day of battle, with a tempest in the day of the whirlwind. And their king shall go into captivity, he and his princes together, saith the Lord. So it's kind of like this, you have Damascus, Gaza, Edom, Ammon. See what he's doing? He's making a circle. Well, guess who's going to be in the middle of the circle? Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Moab, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because he hath burned the bones of the king of Edom into lime. But I will send a fire upon Moab, and it shall devour the palaces of Kerioth, and Moab shall die with tumult, with shouting, and with the sound of the trumpet. And I will cut off the judge from the midst thereof, and will slay all the princes thereof with him, saith the Lord. So he went in a circle. And then all, of course, of God's people are like, yeah, get them, judge them. Get them, judge them. That's our custom. Get them, judge them, custom. That's what I'm at. The 18. So that he got their attention, right? He's calling down judgment upon their enemies. And sometimes that's the way we could be. We want God to judge all the enemies. Just like the apostles. Remember James and John? They wanted to call down fire from heaven because the Samaritans were rejecting them, opposing them. Lord, would you not call down fire from heaven upon them? And Jesus said, what am I to do with you guys? I'm going to call you guys sons of thunder. And then you could see as they matured, then John was later on known as the apostle of love, right? So he understood. But sometimes we can be that way. We want God to judge our enemies, or we'll say his enemies. Those that are the LGBTQ, or those that believe different things. A lot of times not even understanding maybe why they're that way. Some of them could be, you think of some of the criminals that have done these horrendous crimes, and you find out that they were abused as children, and it just warped their mind. And sometimes when you understand what happened to them in the past, kind of gives you a little bit of sympathy towards why they did what they did or why they were that way, because they were treated horribly. And maybe the people that treated them horribly were also treated horribly growing up. But we don't know. We don't know what really someone goes through or what causes them to do what they do. Being a part of the RAM program for so many years, I've got to meet and get to know people. And you don't realize why people has done what they have done. Just like my father. My father, he died because of crystal meth. They found him on King Street, which is, like a terrible way to end your life. And, just doing drugs, walking, falling over dead. And, and you're thinking to yourself, man, my father had such a good career. He's about to be promoted to captain at one point. He ended up having to, give up his job because he was tested dirty on drugs or whatever. And then from there, he just kind of was a progressive, steady decline of his life. And then when you find out certain things, as he would say certain things at certain times, on how he was abused as a child. And so sometimes people are trying to forget this horror that they've experienced. And so they try anything to what they call self-medicate or whatever, to forget what had happened. And then pretty soon it becomes an addiction. And I remember one time when we were raising money for a RAM or something, we were, forget what it was. Was that Safeway though? And then I was walking, I just overheard someone. And they said, I'm not going to give to Chronics. I'm not going to support that. These people, they made their choice. I remember hearing that and thinking, bro, you have no clue. You have no clue. And some people did just that way. We got to be careful that we as Christians don't become like that. Whereas there are people that are atheists. There are people that are homosexual. There are people that are lesbian. There are people that are transsexuals or whatever. There's a particular guy, I don't want to say his name because everyone knows him. But there's a particular person around here. I've known him pretty much most of my life. And you kind of know the backstory and some of the bad decisions this person made. But a lot of people like to laugh at him, make fun of this person. And I remember when we had our teen retreat, I think we were coming back from something. And then someone said, yelled out the window, "Look at so-and-so, hey, that's your girlfriend." They're teasing, like laughing. "That's not my girl," And I said, "Hey, you guys should be praying for that person. You shouldn't be laughing. I should be praying for that person." And then when we went on another outing for the teen retreat, we saw him again. And they said, "Hey, there's so-and-so. Let's pray for him." So I was like, "Hey." I mean, they might have just been saying that, but hey, you never know. But really, honestly, you have it, sometimes, the devil wants to divide, right? He wants to divide, and he wants to cause a lot of fighting and bickering, even in churches. And so you have mask, no mask, right? Vax, no vax. You have Republican, Democrat, right? And if we're not careful, we can be focusing more on those kind of things. It can be a distraction. Whereas we as Christians, we need to love others. We need to point them to Christ. I mean, there's some things I don't understand how someone could see things that way. But had I grown up or had their background, maybe I'd see it that way too. Like, I don't know how someone could be a Dallas Cowboy fan. I think everyone should be a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Why would you not want to be? And so here's Amos preaching, bringing this message of judgment. So you see the first 2 chapters are basically judgment. Then you have messages, poems, messages that he's giving to the people. So as we kind of do an overview, these chapters are about, obviously, judgment, as we just read that part. But then he comes down now, as he got everyone's attention. Now he's going to zoom in. Look at verse 4. "Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Judah." And they're like, Huh? Us? We're God's people. It reminds me of David, King David. Remember King David? When he just killed, he had someone killed after he had committed adultery with that person's wife. And he was going to get found out, so you want to act like the hero. So the guy dies because he had him killed in war. He set it up so the guy would die. And then he was going to take this guy's wife, because now she's a widow. I'll be Mr. Nice Guy. I'll take her in, take care of her, and so. So he was being a hypocrite, right? And then Nathan the prophet comes up to King David and says, "King David, you ain't gonna believe what happened in the kingdom. There's this wealthy guy who has flocks of sheep. And he has a neighbor who is just very poor and has 1 pet lamb. I mean, it was a family pet. This wealthy guy's friend was coming to town. So he takes that guy's lamb and slaughters it and makes a feast for his friend." And King David said, "What? Heads will roll." He said, "That man will be put to death." And Nathan said to David, "David, thou art the man." So it was easy for David to be very strict on someone who killed a neighbor's pet lamb, but easy on himself when he just committed adultery and murder. And these were sins that there was no sacrifice for. Because if you committed adultery, you were the sacrifice. You were put to death. And same for murder. So sometimes if we're not careful, we can be that way. We can be very, very harsh on everybody else and very, very merciful and lenient on ourselves. Should be the other way around. We should be very hard on ourselves and merciful and lenient on everybody else. And if we show mercy, we'll receive mercy. So now that's what's happening here. He says, okay, now he's talking about judgment upon Judah. For 3 transgressions of Judah, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have despised the law of the Lord and have not kept his commandments. They're supposed to know better, and their lies cause them to err after the which their fathers have walked. But I will send a fire upon Judah and it shall devour the palaces of Jerusalem. And then Israel, of course, says, yeah, that's southern kingdom. And then it continues. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Israel, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they sold the righteous for silver, and the poor for a pair of shoes. For material possessions they abuse their own people, that pant after the dust of the earth on the head of the poor, and turn aside the way of the meek. And a man and his father will go in unto the same maid to profane my holy name. That just gross immorality. And they lay themselves down upon clothes laid to pledge by every altar, and they drink the wine of the condemned in the house of their God. Yet destroyed I the Amorite before them, whose height was like the height of the cedars, and he was strong as the oaks. Yet I destroyed his fruit from above and his roots from beneath, and also I brought you up from the land of Egypt. See, God is saying, after all what I've done for you, and then this is how you're going to act. I brought you up from the land of Egypt and led you 40 years through the wilderness. 40 years through the wilderness. You know how long it would have taken them? You know how long the journey was from Sinai to the promised land? You spoiled it. 11 days. I mean, that's the roundabout way. What could have taken 11 days to taken 40 years. That's the back roads. And I raised up of your sons for prophets, and of your young men for Nazarites. Is it not even thus, ye, O ye children of Israel, said the Lord? But ye gave the Nazarites wine to drink. The Nazarites are not supposed to drink wine. And commanded the prophets, saying, prophesy not. Behold, I am pressed under you, as a cart is pressed that is full of sheaves. Therefore the flight shall perish from the swift, and the strong shall not strengthen his force. Neither shall the mighty deliver himself. Neither shall he stand that handleth the bow, and he that is swift of foot shall not deliver himself. Neither shall he that rideth the horse deliver himself. In other words, doesn't matter what you do, or how strong you think you are, or how mighty your army is, nothing you can do. And he that is courageous among the mighty shall flee away, naked in that day, saith the Lord. So the theme of this book is judgment. The purpose is to awaken Israel and its surrounding nations to the fact that the nation is both responsible and accountable for its sin. You know, the Bible says, behold, your sin will find you out. And the Bible also says, be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. When people think that they can get away with sin, or or that God doesn't necessarily care or see. I mean, I think we all know that God sees, but sometimes when we think, God doesn't really care, it's not that big a deal. You reap what you sow. And it may not be the very next day, but you reap what you sow because God set things up that way. So we have the manual. What does the Bible stand for? Basic instruction before leaving earth. And you better get the instruction on before you leave earth, otherwise you're going down this way. You have to be saved. But then after being saved, the Bible tells you how to live. You know, if you get saved, of course you're going to heaven, but if you obey the Bible, you'll live a heavenly life before you get to heaven. It'll be the best kind of life you could live. And so the immediate purpose of his ministry was to call the leaders of Israel to repent and to reform, to change their ways, because they were ripping people up, they were cheating people, they were basically doing things that they shouldn't be doing to the people that were the most needy. That's why the Bible says pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction, and to keep yourself unspotted from the world. That's someone who's real. Someone who's trying to live a pure life, and someone who's trying to help people that needs help. Not helping people so you can get something in return, but helping somebody that really needs help. You know, sometimes you see these famous people, and they go to these hospitals, you know, and it shows them on the camera, right? And you're wondering, was that just all set up? You know, is it that, okay, they got all the cameras, they said, okay, what we need you to do is go over here and give this child a toy, you know, and they're videoing them. I mean, are they really doing that, or is it just all a setup for the publicity? See, that's not impressive if someone helps out the needy because for publicity. So you think, oh, look at that person, he's so nice. No, it's the person that's doing it when no one's watching. And there's no one to thank him or no one to know about it, but yet he's just trying to help people. That's how we should be. Pure religion. If you got something that's real and undefiled before God, God sees. To visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction. That's those that need help. To be a blessing to those that need help. Not for anything else. It says, thou shalt be blessed when we help those that are the needy, we will be blessed. Not to get something back in return. And it says, and then keep yourself pure. Because if you don't keep yourself pure, you're not going to be helping people for very long. So it goes together. You see, when these people strayed from God and started to worship false gods, they started to treat their people horribly. Because the false gods that they worship, they don't require, there's no accountability there. That's why when AANA and all those programs, when they shifted from making Jesus Christ their higher power to anything else, it will not work the same. There's no accountability to anyone else because they're not true gods. They're false gods, whatever it is. But when you get close to Jesus Christ, then he's going to show us, and he's going to give us the strength and the power and ability to be able to help and be a blessing to people around us. And the best way to be a blessing is to point people to Christ and then to nurture them and disciple them. But in life, really, most of the time, most people, and sometimes I think we all struggle with this at times, we're just in it for ourselves. We're trying to get more money for ourselves. We're trying to get more known, more popular, more famous, right, for ourselves. And sometimes we just need to ask ourselves, what for? Like, what is this all about? You know, when one time, when me and Roxanne was on a trip, after we left the church, I asked her, what was this all about? Like, what's the point here? And we should ask ourselves that too sometimes. What are we trying to accomplish here? You know, are we trying to minister and help people and reach people? If so, then when people come into this room, they should sense that. And sometimes I'm sure you've been there, where you've been maybe somewhere to a place or whatever, and you wondered if they were really trying to help people or they're just trying to help themselves. Because that is, you know, what a lot of times you see, even in ministries. But pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction, and to keep yourself unspotted from the world. Why is Las Vegas so popular? Are Christians trying to keep themselves unspotted from the world? That's not an easy place to do that. We just went there for our class reunion. And it's a worldly place. They even call it Sin City, right? And they don't call it that because of all the godliness going on. And I bet you it even affects the churches. But Roxanne had fun, you know. No, we did have fun. But it's, you know, it's a town that's like, wow, man, it's a very interesting place. Very interesting place. So the purpose, to awaken Israel and its surrounding nations to the fact that the nation is both responsible and accountable for its sin, just like each of us, responsible and accountable. So the prophecy is it's about judgment. We talked about the date, the place of the writing. And I want to look at a verse from Amos. about what he says about himself. Look at chapter 7, verse 14 and 15. Then answered Amos and said to Amaziah, I was no prophet, neither was I a prophet's son. He said, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. My father wasn't a pastor or a preacher or anything. He said, I'm just a regular guy. I was no prophet, neither was I a prophet's son, but I was an herdman and a gatherer of sycamore fruit. Just like Nehemiah, he was the king's cupbearer. You know what a king's cupbearer did, right? He had to taste his food. He had to sip his beverage. And they watched him. If he didn't die, then the king assumed it was okay for him to partake of it. I mean, how'd you like that job? Wait, don't eat yet, king. Hey, cupbearer. Here, you check it out. Okay, is he going to die or not? You'd feel rather expendable, right? And you see, here's Amos. He was a herdman. He had his own little flock. And in order to pay for them to graze, he would gather the sycamore fruit as a side job and they would have to bore holes in it so it would ripen. He was just a blue-collar, humble guy. And it says in verse 15, And the Lord took me as I followed the flock, and the Lord said unto me, Go, prophesy unto my people Israel. Just like Nehemiah, who was a cupbearer, just like Amos, who was a herdman and a gatherer of sycamore fruit. I mean, he basically was a plantation worker. And yet God used him to prophesy. God could use anyone that is willing to be used. Don't think that, well, I don't have an education, or I don't know the Bible that well. I remember I used to think that I don't know the Bible. That's why I wanted to go to Bible school, so I could learn the Bible. And God called me to preach, and I was like, man, I don't even know the Bible. So I went to Bible college. But you don't even have to go to Bible college to learn the Bible. All you got to do is want to learn it. And then open it up and read it and study it and make an effort. A major way to, first good step, of course, obviously salvation, is to get a Bible. To have your own Bible. I don't know how many times that something that I wrote on the side helps me to remember what that chapter's about. Maybe someone preached something and I kind of jotted down a note. Have you a Bible? Oh, again, I'm on my phone. How are you going to write them down? I know there's ways, but you know how it is. Things get updated and, But with a Bible, you don't have to worry. And then when you're in church, you don't have to get distracted. Just focus. That would help you a lot right there. But if you're going to be checking on, scores and, playing video games, you're not going to learn it. You have to focus. You have to just want to. Just be hungry for it. Just have the desire. And then you ask the Lord, help me. Help me learn it. People a lot of times will say, I just can't understand the Bible. Ask the author. Ask him. Sometimes I trip out. It's not that hard. You're not going to ever learn it all. The Bible's eternally deep. But man, today I was studying something. Honestly, I want to preach it on Sunday afternoon. This person was preaching this like a couple of years ago. And he was saying, this may happen, which is happening now. And I'm thinking, this could be the next thing that happens. And it's right in the Bible. I was excited about that. I might preach about that Sunday afternoon. Then I thought, I want to preach that on the Super Bowl Sunday. But no, I don't think I can wait. So the Bible's an amazing book. The more you get to know it. When we went to a magic show in Vegas, they had a cheap magic show. It was pretty cheap to go. And the person was a new, they're illusionists, right? They do things, it looks like it's magic, right? But it's just illusion. And it's pretty amazing. But there's some kind of trick to it. You just don't know what the trick is. Like this guy calls up somebody, he just a random number. He has people pick out this number. Okay, give me 3 numbers. Okay, you give me 3 numbers. Do I know you? No. Did I ever talk to you before? No. And then you get the area code, and he shows it on the phone, and it comes up on the screen. Or I think he's showing you the numbers. He's punching in what was mentioned. Then he calls somebody. He said, hey, it's some random number. First number went dee-dee-dee. So then they did another number. And so then they got the number. He pressed it. Someone answered the phone, and the guy put him on FaceTime. So he's showing everybody. He says, okay, so now, and he asked them some questions, and the answers were, the person inside the show had those answers already. And so he says, pick this, or pick a card or whatever, pick any card, and the guy picks that card that the person had said. And you're like, whoa, and I'm like, come on, that guy was that thing was pre-programmed to go, there's some kind of, and I don't know how all of the things are done, but it's not real. It's made up. If it was real, that would be weird. That'd be, of the dark side. But, do you know what's amazing? 10 trillion, 1,000 times more amazing than that is when God could tell you the end from the beginning in His book. If someone thinks that trick was impressive, you should read Daniel 11 and just look at all the things specifically of kingdoms rising and falling, individual people, their names given 150 years before they're even born. All the prophecies concerning Jesus Christ. There's no way this could have just randomly happened by chance. And that's the Bible. So to me, I want to get to know it. I want to learn it. I want to get to know it. And another way you could learn it, being saved, getting a Bible, having a hunger for it, and obeying it. Because if you stop obeying it, you're going to start losing what you already know. And if we're not going to obey it, why is God going to give us more information? Why is He going to give us more information to disobey? So that's another key point. Just give you the outline and we'll close. So first thing is the introduction, verse 1 and 2. Then you have the judgment upon the nations, surrounding nations, and of course upon Judah and Israel. And then you see message of condemnation, chapters 3 to 6. And then you have 5 symbolic visions of judgment. So you got the messages of condemnation and visions of judgment, chapters 7 through 9. And then of the conclusion, the restoration of the Davidic kingdom. And all the minor prophets, they always end with that. The millennial kingdom, the restoration of the Davidic kingdom. So that's the book. We'll continue this next week, but that's basically it. The overview of Amos. Famous Amos. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes?
You have been listening to our Truth to Live By podcast, a ministry of Windward Baptist Church. This podcast is supported by the gifts and donations of its listeners. You can make a secure donation through our website at windwardbaptist.org.